This is a film review of the recently released Chinese fantasy film, The Legend of the Demon Cat, 妖猫传. Hi, you're watching AvenueX, where a junkie on good storytelling shares her thoughts, knowledge, and occasional weird ideas on stories and how they're told. I don't usually do film reviews, I do TV drama reviews, but for this particular film, I just feel I have a lot to say and a lot to think about that I want to share with people who watch my channels and who might be interested or who have heard about this film and wondering what it is about. This film was released on December the 22nd in 2017, so it's still a very new and recent film. It's directed by Chen Kaige. If you're familiar with Chinese cinema, you should know his name. He's one of the most famous directors of today, and his most prominent and well-known work is Farewell to My Concubine, 霸王别姬. The Legend of the Demon Cat is led by Xuan, a Chinese actor, and Sometani Shota, a Japanese actor. In this film, they play a Chinese poet and a Japanese monk during Tang dynasty, and they teamed up trying to find out why there's this demon cat that seems to be wreaking a havoc in the capital city, causing a lot of death and trouble. This is an adaptation of the Japanese novel written by Yumemakura Baku. So in many ways, this film is a Japanese perspective of the imagined Tang dynasty of China at the peak of its economic power, its political power, and cultural power. And it centers around finding out the mystery of the death of Yang Guifei, concubine Yang Guifei. She is one of the most famous women in Chinese history, and if you know anything about Chinese history, you probably have heard about her name and her love story with Emperor Li Longji. I would do this review in two parts. The first part will be spoiler free, or rather, like, as long as you watch the trailer, you know what this film is about, and then talking about more of the facts that you might find interesting about this film. And then the second part will be more spoiler heavy, and we'll be talking about my reaction, my ideas, and my opinions about what is good, what is brilliant, and what is kind of not quite there. So first, let's talk about the spoiler-free things about this film. The Legend of the Demon Cat, 妖猫传, is first and foremost an adaptation film from a literature piece, and then it is a cooperation production between Japanese side and the Chinese side. And the production team is heavily mixed with Japanese and Chinese crews. All the CGI, so post-production, was done by a Japanese company, and also the theme song is sung by a Japanese band named Red Wimps. If you are a fan, you will find it very interesting because they actually wrote an English song for this Japanese and Chinese cooperated film. This is the most expensive Chinese film ever made, depending on how you count the budget. Because Chen Kaige, the director, had the idea of making this film for a long time, so he actually spent 6 years preparing. Most of the time went into building an actual city in Hubei province now that is trying to imitate Tang Dynasty's Chang'an city. It's a huge project, so most of the money went into building the physical place, and they filmed the film largely in the built city. Now, the film's biggest selling point is one, obviously, it's an adaptation of a very famous writer's very famous work. But then the other thing is its visuals. If you've seen the trailer, which is available on YouTube, you just need to search it. There are many versions. The visual is explosive. The sets are incredible. The colors are just unseen like before. The director, the cinematographer, and the producer, they did a conscious choice to not make this movie 3D, so there's no 3D version floating out there because traditional Chinese aesthetic is perspective free. It's all 2D. It's like a flat sort of aesthetics of how you view the world. If you have an opportunity to see it on a bigger screen, you really should do this, because this is one of those films that needs that space. It needs the big look to take you into its world, and there are some incredible shots that is just visually explosive, and it will not do it justice to sit on a tiny computer screen or even on your TV. Before I go into the spoiler territory, I wanna introduce you to the story of Yang Guifei and Li Longji if you're not familiar, because that's kind of the core of this film. Historically, Li Longji is Tang Xuanzong. Xuanzong is his title as a particular emperor, and Li Longji is his name. And Yang Guifei, Yang is her surname, Guifei is her title. She's a concubine, so Fei is concubine. Guifei, Gui means precious. During that part of the reign of Li Longji, he had no empress. So basically, Yang Guifei is the highest woman in the inner court, and you can call her a de facto empress, even though she didn't have the title. She comes from a family where her parents died when she was very young, so she was brought up by her uncle. And she was actually picked as the consort to one of Li Longji's sons. But then, the father-in-law saw this daughter-in-law and decided she is just too beautiful to be the wife of his son, and decided, you are going to be my concubine, and she becomes Yang Guifei. Historical record review, people at that time didn't really have a strong reaction to what happened. It seems in Tang Dynasty, particularly around that section of Tang Dynasty, people's minds are just really open. The general social and morale of the capital is just very loose and very open. So, even though father-in-law steals daughter-in-law, it wasn't really frowned upon. So Yang Guifei is famous for being a very beautiful woman and super artistically talented. She is famous for her ability to dance. And Li Longji, the emperor, is also a very famous artist. He wrote a very famous piece of music, and that is now lost. And then Yang Guifei danced to it. So it's a legend in Chinese history. But their story didn't end up very well. The country runs into trouble, and there's a rebellion headed by An Lushan and Shi Siming. So An Shi Zhiluan happened in history, and basically the emperor took the concubine and running away from the capital. On the way of their escape, the emperor's own troop decided to rebel against him unless he kills the concubine, because they blame every bad things that's happened to the country on her and on her maternal brother. This is very typical that happens in history. It's like when something goes wrong, it's all the woman's fault. Don't know exactly what happened. We know she died and she probably got strangled. That's what's written in history, at a place where they were basically surrounded by their own army. That place is called Ma Weipo, and she's believed to be buried there. Now, obviously, the emperor later came back to the capital, came back to his power. People want to believe that he is saddened by this event. He's regretful of what he had to do, and for the rest of his life, he would be thinking about her. Now let's go into spoiler territory, what this film is really about. It is very hard to say what Legend of Demon Cat is. It seems that it has so many layers in trying to do so many things at once. And even after watching it twice, I'm still not sure exactly what the director is trying to get at. I think he's trying to attempt something that is far too complicated to be unfolded in 2 hours' time. But still, this is a very peculiar film, because I went in this film believing that this is a film about a mystery, so a simple mystery solving. And I came out feeling it's really not about a mystery at all. And also, I went in believing that Huang Xuan, playing Bai Juyi, the poet, and Sometani Shoda, playing the monk, are the lead roles. And indeed they are. They have the biggest chunk of screen time. But I actually found that they are the people there to link everything together. They physically walk through most of the shots, going through Chang'an City, trying to figure out what happens. And they connect all the stories of current time setting in the film and 30 years ago in the past, what has happened. So they're really tools. They're the narrator of the story, and the story is about what really happened 30 years ago. More specifically, what is the real story behind the sort of believed version of Yang Guifei's death and her love story with the emperor. Now, in this film, it's based on the book. So in the book as well, it is an illusion. Like, people believe they are sort of the ideal couple, but it wasn't. The emperor sacrificed Yang Guifei to keep himself safe. And the person who really loved her and did all the crazy things for her is the person that later became the demon cat. It's a young man's role, and it's played by the young actor Liu Haoran, who is also acting in Nirvana in Fire 2 as the main lead. So I went into this film believing the other two actors are actually the core of the storytelling, but then I came out and realized the real story is what happened 30 years ago, and the story between Yang Guifei and Bai Long character played by Liu Haoran. And Liu Haoran is the hidden main role. And that is the place where I had most problems, because I understand as a cooperation production between two countries, also as an adaptation of a Japanese novel. Because in the original novel, the monk from Japan, Kukai, who is also a real person in history, is the narrator, and he is the main role. He is the person who made this story happen. So if your adaptation takes him out or plays him down to the part that he's a supporting role, it wouldn't make sense to all the book fans, and probably wouldn't make sense to Japanese side of the production or the writer or anyone who would go into watching this film knowing the existence of this book. But the way the film is told, the story is made, really gives you the sense that if there was a choice of just be even more bolder with the original material and just to be responsible for the film story, the ideal way of changing the story structure is actually downplaying Baiji Huangxuan's role and the monk Kukai's role to minimum. Probably reduce their screen time like 80%, and giving all that time to what happened 30 years ago between Yang Guifei and Bai Long and Li Longji, the emperor, the concubine, and the young man. So that is the biggest problem I have with this film, is I feel it's being hijacked by the fact that it is an existing book's adaptation, and it needs to satisfy every side that has a chunk of money invested in this and then has some expectations of what they can get. I also understand that without putting the two lead actors' name out there, nobody probably would go into the theater to watch the film, because the other two main leads, Yang Guifei's character played by Zhang Rongrong and Bai Long's character played by Liu Haoran, these two actors are relatively unknown, so it wouldn't make sense for them to carry such an expensive production. But despite having very little screen time, actually for both the Yang Guifei's role and Liu Haoran's Bai Long's role, they both did a brilliant job. It left a very strong impression on me, even stronger than the two main lead actors who are present most of the time on screen. I'm very impressed by Liu Haoran's ability to pull off his obsessive young man's role in Love, considering he was only probably 19 when he made this film. It's pretty incredible that he could leave such a strong impression of his roles, I think on me and on a lot of audience, because when they come out, a lot of people are saying, you know, we realized he is actually the main character of the story and we're moved by his acting. As for Zhang Rongrong's Yang Guifei, because in the book, she is written as a mixed blood, so she's not pure Chinese, she's half Huren. Huren is the ancient way of calling people coming from other places other than original Chinese, such as, for example, Middle Asia, probably Persia people, so having a more Caucasian look. Zhang Rongrong is from Taiwan, and she is a French Taiwanese mixed actress. She has a very strong, actually, European Caucasian look on her face. And in the original Japanese novel, Yang Guifei's role is written like that. So this is actually a very faithful adaptation of the original material, and I have to say, she played this role beautifully. She's not just physically stunning, her acting very subdued, minimum, but very heartbreaking. People who are familiar with Chinese history might find it hard to accept, because it's hard to put a Caucasian face onto a traditional Chinese historical figure. But interestingly enough, during Tang Dynasty, China was actually very open to the point that there are over like 30,000 foreigners living in Chang'an City, and as long as you can speak Chinese, you can actually go pass exams and become a government official while you're still a foreigner. This is unheard of, like, I think in anywhere in the world even till today. Imagining a foreigner, you know, going to, for example, US, you know, you have Chinese passport and you still hold that passport and you still become a minister of whatever division of the country. That's unthinkable, but this really happened in Tang Dynasty. So Tang was extremely open, and because of so many foreign influences on the land, it is actually not that impossible. And we know for a fact that a lot of historical famous people during that time was actually mixed blood, coming from all different directions. So this is actually a very interesting way of looking at this part of the history that is now very distant from us. I would really recommend this film to people who are interested in Chinese history, in particular Tang Dynasty. Even though there's no way that it could be 100% accurate to history, it has a lot of current aesthetics worked into it. It is still one of the most expensive and most interesting way of looking at that imagined, powerful, culturally, politically, economically dynasty that existed in history. And at its core, it has many layers of complicated philosophy worked into it, such as, what is love? What is obsession? What is the secret that the Kukai monk is trying to search on his way of finding the sort of ultimate secret of Buddhism, and about life, because Buddhism really talks a lot about life and death and physical forms and what is considered you and all that very complicated stuff. It does talk a lot about that. It also talks about creative work, because it comes from the poet Huang Xuan's character Bai Juyi's point of view as a young man trying to be an aspiring poet, trying to be authentic with his writing and fighting all his writer's blocks, searching for the truth and realizing probably at the end that facts don't really matter that much. It's the emotion, it's the love that people have that is real, and whether it happened between these two people or those two people, it's not as important as the fact that it existed, and it deserves the most beautiful words to praise it. I know this sounds like a lot of mumbo jumbo, but if you go to watch this film, I think you understand the points that I'm making here. It is one of the most intriguing and interesting film I have seen in my short stay in China. So I highly recommend that if it's not available where you are, then you should keep it on your list and then check back on it once it becomes available online, which probably in 2 or 3 months' time it will happen. Thank you so much for watching AvenueX. I'll see you in my next video. Meanwhile, live long and happy drama film watching.